here with Gerry Gebel. He's Vice President of the Burton Group, and we're going to talk about entitlement management. Is it ready to enter the identity management mainstream? Gerry, what's the current state of the market?
Well, I'd say it's somewhere in its teenage years, not quite mature yet, but certainly evolving over time. It's been interesting to watch the market over the past several years, and there's been a lot of advancements that we can talk about, say, in the past 12 months or so, and I think lots of interesting things to look for in the next few years. So, but it's somewhere in the middle there. It's certainly not a mature technology, but not necessarily a bleeding edge one either.
Standards. Are there any standards? What's the current state of authorization standards?
Mm-hmm. Well, as it turns out, it's not quite as complicated as some other identity management areas. If you think, to federation, where there's been some protocol standard battles over the years, mostly settled now, but there's still a number of protocols that you need to apply to different federation scenarios. In the authorization and entitlement space, it's really all about XACML, the Extensible Access Control Markup Language, also known as XACML.
Yes, and the players in the market, I think there's Microsoft with SharePoint has made some inroads. Who are the players?
Well, SharePoint is actually one of these applications that the entitlement management vendors want to secure or add additional security to, but the vendors in the space is actually quite a large number. Some that are well-known names like Oracle, Cisco, IBM, RSA, Siemens, for example, and then a lot of smaller, interesting vendors like BitCoo, Axiomatics, Next Labs, Bayshore Networks. There's quite a number of vendors in this space, so it's quite a number of smaller and newer vendors trying to make some innovative changes.
And we've seen some here actually
Indeed.
Doing their presentations.
Indeed.
In terms of role-based management, we hear about entitlements and attributes. Is claims-based making an inroad into this? We hear this.
It is claims-based, of course, is a model promoted primarily by Microsoft as part of their Geneva rollout with Windows Identity Foundation and other components. I think some of the terminology discussions are talking about the same issues, because you have certain people talking a lot about claims-based identity, others that attribute-based is the way to go, still others that say that role management is an important part of the authorization environment. I think essentially they're all right. The ones that say they have the exclusive ownership of the best model or are excluding other models at their detriment. I think customers look at all of these things as they need attributes to make authorization decisions, but they also want to use roles to define and rationalize some of the policy environment. And after all, roles are attributes too, or claims. Why should we be so dismissive of that?
And you mentioned authorization. Should this? What are the pros and cons of having it shared or central?
I think the key factor here, and one of the benefits of having these conversations and using terminology like claims-based authorization or identity management, is that we're evolving in the architectures of applications where we want to externalize this processing from the business logic, right, and utilize a shared service, I think is what you're getting at there, right, is the benefits of having a shared infrastructure service where you define policies for authorization that can be implemented across application environments. And so you have a more centralized place for controlling and securing access to applications.
And the inhibitors to implementation, some of the protocols, is there any issues there?
The primary inhibitor, well, let's say there's two primary inhibitors to really broad adoption of entitlement management products as we're talking about here. One is the difficulty of retrofitting existing or legacy applications. So that's, and of course there's a lot of them out there, right? So the effort, the cost, the risk of retrofitting or renovating those applications to incorporate a shared authorization service is not always the best option for organizations. The other inhibitor is the lack of adoption by software developers, whether they be large developers like name vendors or just the SaaS application providers. So there's not a broad adoption on the application developer side yet to utilize standards such as XACML. We have a lot of adoption of XACML within the identity management vendor community, but it's always the case, can we get the applications on board as well?
And the early adopters, what sort of challenges are they facing?
Yeah, a number of them. One is just performance concerns. Sometimes they're well-founded, other times maybe they can be dealt with. But if you have, for example, response time sensitive applications where you have a heavy workload, well, now I'm concerned about externalizing this authorization decision because I can't afford that kind of latency. Now there's ways of dealing this, putting more policy decision points with the application, caching policy, and so on. So there's ways of dealing with it, but it is certainly a concern. Another concern is, well, I have a really complex business application environment. How can I model that sophisticated rule set in an XACML policy? And that's, that this requires some extensive experience. And, there are some people in the industry trying to work with new ways of modeling those policies so we can address those more sophisticated kinds of environments. So that's a couple of examples of barriers or inhibitors.